Well, good morning. I know that you've had a very active morning. You've gotten to get up and move around a lot. You've gotten to really engage other people with in-depth discussions. And you've really added to your knowledge base. So I'm really glad that I can be here as part of that. I'm also happy that I can be the one thing keeping you from lunch. Because since you've been moving around a lot and engaging all the parts of your body, you've not been sitting for hours listening to people talk to you, I know how hungry you likely are. So I'm going to try to keep this as informational as humanly possible, but I want to get started with a little bit of a story. How many of you have ever been to Atlanta? Any of you ever been to Atlanta? Oh, good. So then you're familiar with the personal hellscape that is trying to find a parking space in Atlanta. You drive around, you wonder, what did I do in my past lives that created the condition where I'm unable to find any suitable place? Well, a few years ago, we were in the SEC Championship, which, if you're not yet a football fan, this is the first step in your indoctrination, so please eschew all former allegiances and write yourself accordingly. So we're in the SEC Championship, we're playing in Atlanta against Florida, and we do what Bama fans are wont to do, which is congregate with one another and be incredibly obnoxious. So we're trying to find a parking space, and I drive by this strip mall. And there was something about this strip mall that sort of stopped my attention. I was arrested, and I said, okay, there's got to be a story here. So I'm going to show you a picture. And based solely on the image that I show you, I want you to try to guess what you think this business does. So I've gone ahead and I photoshopped out what the sign underneath it says. But based solely on what you see here, I want you to try to guess what you think this business does. Turn to your neighbor and engage in a little bit of conversation, trying to guess what you think the business does. I'll give you 30 seconds. So, my back quadrant, I know you know like you've got to stay engaged because you sat all the way back here, but this is what we're doing. So, let me shout out what you thought this business did with these guys. Boba tea. One of those places where you're drinking tea and you get a shot of pudding, and there's nothing worse than surprise pudding when you're in the body to a boba tea place. Okay, now back right, what do we come up with? Bait shop? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the place that where it looks like something on a USB port, and it's like, oh, you think you're cool. There's something on the USB port. Like, that's uncomfortable. Okay, middle section, what do we come with over here? Swimwear? Like, there's enough room in the Atlanta marketplace for we can do a brick and mortar store of swimwear. I like to think in the American economy. Dow Jones yesterday. Let's see how that turned out. A liquor store? Yeah, like that would make sense. That'd be like a champagne. Our front people, you've been asked a lot of questions. Come to Bubbles. We promise we'll smooth you out. Right, yeah, okay, I won't repeat that. That's a good insight. Any ideas about the front? What? A spa, right? Like a place where the fish nibble at your feet, feels kind of weird. So all of you are wrong. So the sign, Bubbles, we do hair. Now, what this tells us is that somebody spent a lot of money to put together a beautiful sign that said, that's cool, that's different, the font, the graphic, the whole thing is kind of working. And then, enough people came in and said, hey, is this where I can get my boba tea? Hey, do you all sell those swimwears with the weird cutouts on the side? Because nothing makes somebody feel more comfortable in a swimsuit than having their sides exposed. Maybe this is a place where I can have my liquor store. Or, hey, listen, can you take care of my cellulite, right? They went there, and they got enough people asking them questions that eventually they got frustrated, and they had to produce a second sign that explained what they actually did. And it's this idea of being unable to clearly communicate who you are and what you can do for others that's at the heart of what I'm going to talk about for the next half an hour. So my name is Dr. Adam Brooks. I'm the director of the speaking studio here at the University of Alabama. I also help run our public speaking program. And my role is to help people, particularly with technical backgrounds, become better at communicating their ideas. I've been a faculty member here for the last, this is my 5th year, and I got my PhD also from here. So I've sat in this space that you all have and got the binder, and then I kept that binder on my shelf and referred to it diligently for years. I actually did. Stuff that will come up. But I was a teaching assistant for a long time, so I understand what it's like. But for me, it's important for you to talk to you this morning a little bit about it, because I know that for many people, you are the delivery of the promise that they have signed themselves up for. How many of you ever bought something online? You good. This is also a snapshot of the American economy. All right. So, how many of you ever bought something online, and then when it arrived at your house, the picture online and what arrived at your doorstep were two very different things? Yeah. And how did you feel after that? Upset? Did I make a mistake? In many cases, the students that are arriving in your classes, in your labs, in your spaces, you are in the box that has arrived on their front door. They came here and they bought the capstone men and women with their slick red suits and their beautiful tours of campus and the rah-rah videos and the where legends are made. And then they're going to arrive on Wednesday and they're coming into your classroom and you're the package that they bought. So you have to think, how am I presenting myself? How many of you, this will be your first semester, that you are going to be involved in teaching of some capacity? So you're teaching for maybe the very first time. All right. First lesson of being a teacher is when someone asks you a question. Raise your hands. And welcome to the wonderful world of being disappointed when you ask a question to an audience and you're going to get middling responses. We know that many of you are perhaps nervous. And maybe you've been sitting here all day and you've been thinking about, okay, I know that I came to graduate school because I wanted to study X, Y, or Z. I wanted to become an expert in that field. I wanted to advance the research or discovery in a particular element, but in order to do that, I have to teach people? Why? And maybe you're starting to feel like you're a fraud. And maybe you're starting to feel like, well, who am I to teach this stuff? I didn't get a degree in education. What do I do? So I'm here to give you some tips and tricks. We're going to talk about a little bit about how we might formulate some of the presentations we're giving in our classrooms. Then we'll talk about some tips for dynamic delivery that will make your students want to actually listen to some of the things you have to say. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we'll talk about how we calm that anxiety that lives within us. That feeling like you're about to throw up and that maybe you don't know what you're doing. And the first step to that is acknowledging its reality and being able to work through it. That's what we're going to do over the next half an hour together. The first thing we have to do is ask the right questions. We have to think about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And by the way, the tips I'm going to give you this morning are applicable anytime you're presenting your research or you're presenting in a classroom. You ever think about why we communicate? Why do we have people get up and give talks just like this one? What's the point? To learn, to give information. Perhaps I could just send you all of this in an email. And in fact, you have it in an email in front of you. So I don't need to get up here and talk about it, right? So we're not necessarily communicating just for information. In fact, I argue we have the opposite problem. We actually suffer from having too much access to too much information. How many of you have ever gotten a really long email from a supervisor or a boss? Typically, what's the first question you ask yourself after you finish that email? What was I supposed to do? What does this mean? And you end up going down the hall to talk to your coworker or your friend. You're like, hey, did you get that thing? What are we supposed to do with that? So we're not necessarily communicating just to share information. I argue that our job as researchers, as experts, as knowledge producers, is to make information meaningful. And we know that communication is a large factor in credibility, in perception of value. There's a reason why, since the beginning of time, we've associated strong communication abilities with leadership. People judge our intelligence based not necessarily on what we produce on that godforsaken GRE that some of you have to take. I have to take it, it's terrible. We don't really judge your knowledge based on that. Your knowledge will be based on the perception of what you know based on how well you communicate to others. When people ask you what are you studying, how well you are able to articulate to a non-technical audience or a lay audience about what that means and why that's valuable. We also know that when we ask employers what they're looking for people coming out of programs at the undergraduate and graduate level, the top 5 skills they're looking for, 4 of them relate to communication. The ability to problem solve without rules, the ability to communicate up and down, you can communicate to supervisors but also manage teams, the ability to present information to audiences, the ability to make people understand complex information. All of that is a key factor of not only your ability to get hired either in industry or in academia. We have really outdated systems of hiring faculty. If you want to become a faculty member somewhere, the main thing that they're used to judge you on, besides your materials and your CV, they'll bring you to campus, and what are they going to have you do?
Job talk.
Now you give a job talk. And in 45 minutes, try to judge how well we're going to hire you for 7 years, based on 45 minutes. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but this is the world we live in. We do lots of things that don't make sense. So I want to give you 5 questions that you can ask yourself anytime you're asked to present somewhere. Whether you're planning a lecture for class or you're presenting at a conference. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, who am I talking to? Who are my people? Who is my audience? I know things about you, for instance, because I once was you. Sunrise, sunset. Sorry, I'm a musical person. Who am I talking to? What matters to them? Human beings are inherently selfish assholes. We typically only care about what directly matters to us. So there are some of you in here that are like, I'm never going to get up and teach a lecture. What does this matter to me? There are some of you in here probably thinking that. You're thinking, how is this going to relate to the biology lab that I'm going to teach and have to look at lab reports and none of this is going to be useful? You're wrong, because you're going to be presenting all the time, even if you're not in class, because these things tend to carry over. Who am I talking to? Well, you have to think about and answer the question of, what is in it for them? Why do they need this? I'm talking to you this morning not just because tomorrow you're going to get up and present 3 minutes of material for each other, but also because this is our only chance to really catch you and inform you about the importance of being able to communicate your ideas. Who am I talking to and what matters to them? A man by the name of Kenneth Burke, who's a communication scholar, once said that you can persuade someone to the degree to which you can speak their language. And in that sense, he's not talking about English. He's talking about when I'm talking to you, when you're talking to your students, do they feel like you understand them? That doesn't mean you try to be cool and be like, hey kids, I got Snapchat over the weekend. I got the dog filter. It's really great. Add me on Snapchat. Isn't that cool? It'd be like that sometimes, right? Like, it doesn't mean you have to speak their language in terms of trying to position yourself to them, but put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself where you were. Think about where you were your freshman year, your sophomore year, walking into a college classroom. Think about what you needed from the people that inspired you. Think about that professor that you had that made you decide to go to graduate school in that subject. A very terrible life choice that you have made that someone encouraged you to do. And can you be like that for somebody else? Who am I talking to? Second question you have to ask yourself is, what am I trying to accomplish? A lot of times people make the mistake of putting about 2 hours worth of material into a 5-minute bag. And for some of you, you're going to have that same issue. You're going to go, okay, I'm supposed to teach chapter 7 of this textbook, of which there are 47 pages, and I have 45 minutes. So let me do a page of material every minute. What you have to think about is organizing your information into buckets. I recommend organizing any presentation you have into at least 2 to 3 main ideas, no more than 4 or 5, depending on how much time you have. I often can tell how bad a presentation is going to be when they pull up their PowerPoint and I look at the number of slides on the right-hand column versus how much time they have. So for example, when somebody comes up and they're like, okay, I'm going to talk to you for half an hour, and you've got 60 slides, I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. It's going to be a hot mess express. But this is going to be Here's the question. When I'm finished, what are 2 things I want my audience to be able to do? When I'm finished, what are 2 things I want my audience to be able to do? Drive everything you have to that. So if you're thinking about your courses, and you're saying, okay, I know they have a paper coming up about the history of machinery in America. I pulled that out of nowhere. Machinery in America. Well, okay, what are the 2 things you really want people to take away from that and drive towards that? Build with the end in mind. I see so many presentations where people do what I call the inverted pyramid style, where basically they start as broadly as possible and they try to narrow in what they're actually focused on, and by the time they get to what they were trying to actually get to, the audience is gone. They decided they moved on and they're never coming back. So think about it. If everything is built on those 2 ideas, then you can really build that together. And this is where your syllabus construction becomes part of that. For example, if you know they have a group presentation coming up on the history of rhetoric and popular culture, class that I teach, then you know what elements you need to cover and what elements you need to study on your own, but you guide it towards them. You are in control of that situation. Similarly, when you are presenting at a conference, don't do that thing where you basically print off your paper and then proceed to read it from the introduction onward. Like, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Do you want people to engage you? Are you trying to get feedback on your method? Are you trying to get feedback on your results? What's the nugget that you think is the most essential piece of information from your study? And make sure you put that puppy front and center. Don't do what feels logical or linear. You don't have to. Be strategic in how you present or organize your information. When are you talking? I know, for example, I'm talking at 11:30 after you've been here all day. And it's 107 degrees outside, but it's also 62 degrees in this room, so you're freezing cold. Welcome to what we call the Alabama winter. It's hot outside, cold inside, you're all getting colds. So I know that, and so as a result, that tells me I've got to have a little more energy than I might normally have. If I presented this to you at 8 in the morning, some of you would be like, oh, we've made a terrible mistake. Is it too late to ask for a refund, etc.? Where am I talking? For example, I teach a class that has 500 students in it every Wednesday evening in Russell Auditorium. It's a giant lecture hall, which means I have to do things specifically. For example, when I was asking for group involvement, typically these folks are the only people that I can hear. And the people who sit way in the back don't want to be engaged. So every now and again, I've got to walk to the back of the room to make sure that I'm physically around them and can see them in that space. At the same time, if I were to present in a room like this, if I present like I am now in a 20-person classroom, that would be a lot. 2 semesters ago, they put my large lecture and my small graduate class back to back. And for the first 15 minutes of that graduate class, I was basically yelling at them. So you want to think about where you're presenting. And then, perhaps the second one beyond what you're presenting is why are you talking about them? Why does this matter? And for this, I give you a piece of advice. Don't be afraid to be a good teacher. I got a lot of advice when I was coming up in graduate school from well-meaning people who told me things like, you don't need to be a great teacher. You definitely don't need to be a good one. You just need to be a teacher. What matters most is your research. It doesn't really matter your teaching. What matters is your research. It doesn't really matter how well your students engage with you. What matters is how many publications you can get. And I thought that was the biggest lie anyone has ever told me. Because what it does is it tells you, don't be afraid to be good at it. There was a thing that made you excited about your subject matter. And perhaps maybe you're teaching in a class that is completely unrelated to your area of expertise. Maybe you are a biomechanical engineer and they're having you grade papers for Math 110. I'm not sure what your situation is. But there was something that made you want to pursue the idea of knowledge. And you have to tap into that every time you get up to speak, every time you get up to lead that class. Remember what that was like. For me, I was a first-generation college student, the first person in my family to ever go to college. And I remember what it was like to walk into that classroom and feel like I'm supposed to be somewhere now. And I remember the amount of debt that I got in to go to that class. Similarly, you have to not be afraid to make your classroom a special thing, to invest emotional energy in what you're presenting and how you do it. Now that we talked about some of the who's and what's and where's, I'm going to skip over this a little bit. You want to think about how you're informing individuals. You're trying to put new ideas. Your goal as an educator is to make the complex simple and to make the simple interesting. How can I make the complex simple and the simple interesting? Well, you have to put information in ways that people can relate to it. Analogies, examples, activities. Try to activate it as best you possibly can. As narratives become really compelling force, don't just think about it in terms of here's this term, here's what it means. What's the broader story that's happening? How can you put this in conversation with where we are today? Then you want to think about how you engage your audience. We know that first impressions happen within the first 7 to 17 seconds. Within the first 7 to 17 seconds, your students are deciding whether or not they're paying attention that day. In the first classroom, they're deciding whether or not they're going to listen to you for the next 14 weeks. When I got up here, you decided in 30 seconds whether or not I was worth your time and attention. I know that to be true. And yet so many people, when they begin any presentation, how do they start? Hi, my name is How do I start?
Hot!
Perhaps I should have skipped the third cup of coffee. How do I start? I had a story that engaged you. But most importantly, though, I had intention together, but then I linked it to what the topic was. I connected it to the overall lesson. It's not what you say, but how you say it. It's not just being able to clearly communicate who you are and what you do in ways that matter. Think about how you can frame that. What is something that's going to catch people's attention? What's something you saw on the news? I love engaging with what the conversations that are happening around campus. I try to read the student newspaper because it helps me understand what people are talking about, and I can help frame things in ways that relate to people. Have a question of the day that gets people going. Then have some kind of justification. Why are we talking about this today? And then preview what you're doing. If you would take nothing else from this morning, let me give you this. And I spent 14 years in graduate education and communication to basically distill this information down to basically one sentence, and it's this. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them. Tell them what you told them. As simple as that is, you would be surprised with how few people will incorporate that in any presentation that you give. And when you hold your classrooms, tell them what you're going to talk about today. Yes, last week we discussed this, this, and this. Today, we're going to talk through first this, second this, third this. That structure will also keep you on track so that you don't go off on a tangent and end up pontificating at them for 20, 30 minutes without really realizing where time has gone. Then, at the end of class, like, okay, today we did this, and we did this. It helps reinforce. We end up hearing at about an 8th grade reading level, and yet we tend to write out our information really complexly and then try to communicate that out to people orally. You have to repeat your ideas over and over and over again orally to get this in. It might feel redundant to you, but I promise it will be impactful for the students you're trying to engage with. So I want to hear a little bit about what are some presentation pitfalls that you see? What are some mistakes that you see people make in delivery? Yes, likes, he knows. What else? Yeah, my friend There's no pause. They ask a question, and then, oh God, there's silence. Oh no, what am I going to do? And there's no engagement in that way. And there are mistakes in delivery people make.
They speak very monotone, so today we're going to talk about the student at war they do about and its role in being a So when you go at the French strategy, expectations, you can see that.
Or they do what I call the PowerPoint karaoke, where you're not really sure what's on here because it's too text heavy, so it's constantly. Okay, so when we look at the French economy of 1812, we can see that do we have any questions? Or they're up here, and we're constantly leaning against things, or we do that what I call the I have to tinkle, where we're up here, and we're just kind of going back and forth, and there's no. People perceive you in your delivery based on your body language. So you have to be confident. You have to be confident. You have to be able to hold the room, own the space. Remember that no matter what level of experience you have as an educator, you know more than the people in the room. You do. By nature of the fact that you at least have a bachelor's degree, you know more than the people in that room do. Don't let them intimidate you. Set a tone early on that you are there to guide them. Set really clear expectations for what's happening. The other thing I'll give you is give good eye contact. The better that you can explain and engage your students, the more they will connect with you. If they feel like you are an automaton that's just sort of narrating the PowerPoint you put together last night at 2 a.m. before you went to bed, they're not going to like what's happening and you're not going to get much from them. Think about how can I engage, how can I make them come alive. Don't be afraid to also veer off. If the conversation turns to something, address it in the room as best you can. The last thing I want to talk about with the few minutes I have left is about calming your anxiety. The first thing you have anytime that you're nervous is to understand that it's 100% natural to be nervous. I'm nervous all the time. And the thing is, you have to get away from the idea of trying to pathologize yourself, where you go, oh God, there's something wrong with me, and I shouldn't be doing this because I feel nervous. It's natural. I'm nervous every time I speak. The goal is not to get rid of your butterflies. The goal is to get them to fly in formation. It's very Oprah, and I'm very proud of it. But that idea is about getting outside of yourself. So what I do is, every time I go to teach a class, I go to the bathroom beforehand, and I stand in a stall, and I literally make myself bigger in space. I put my hands on my hips, and I try to just get out of my head for a minute. Because most of the time, when you are being nervous, you're making it about you, and your audience doesn't care about you. They don't. They actually want you to succeed. When you came in today, you didn't go, oh God, I hope these people are terrible. I hope that these are the most boring presentations I've ever heard. No, you thought, I hope I get something from this. I hope this person's good. Your students are the same way. Regardless of the fact that they're going to give you nothing, this is going to be the face you're going to get for 14 weeks. They still want to be good for you. They still want you to engage them. They still care, even though they don't show it. So don't be afraid to care. So, in a recap, we've talked a little bit about some questions that you can ask to engage yourself in thinking about how you organize your material. We've talked about some strategies for becoming confident and not being afraid to engage your passions. And finally, we talked about calming some of your anxiety and some tips you can do with that. For more information on this, I want you to come and work with our center. So the Speaking Studio is a communication center on campus. We work with you on your presentation skills. We'll bring you in, we'll work with you on how you organize it, we'll film you, you'll hate it, I'll love it, we'll watch the film back together, and you'll get better over time. If you have dissertation proposals or a conference presentation, I want you to work with us. You can find us at speakingstudio.ua.edu. We're based in Reese Pfeiffer. Or you can find us on social media, where you can connect with me on Engineers Who Speak, that account on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. But I really do want you to remember your passion for this. And don't be afraid to be good. Because these students, they don't want you to be the cheap sign that's used as an attention getter for a bad presentation. They want you to be that person that's like, man, I love my English 101 instructor. I love my Bio 102. It caught me alive. Don't be afraid to share yourself with your students because they will remember it and it will be something that comes back to you professionally in such an enlightening way. It's why I got into education, and I hope that one day you can stand in front of a group of people and share the same thing. Thank you so much.